If I can get the panel up, it's not a panel because we're calling it a roundtable.
A roundtable, but it's not table.
We did not want to let, Monaco is about dialogue and about conversation, and we didn't want to let Hans just have the big stage here and then walk off and say thanks. So we've got David Kenny, who some of you will remember in his former guise as head of Digitas and a senior leader of Publicis Group, and has now gone to Akamai, which is an interesting, also talk about broadband. So David's kind of got two hats here of advertising and broadband. Bob Bakish from MTV, who knew a few things about content, especially global content, and I can only assume that when you hear 6 billion little things are going off in your head about how many of those can we get watching MTV broadband in 3D all the time. And then to keep this crew on the tracks or off the tracks, we'll see what we get off the tracks if we can.
Okay.
Emma Barnett from the Daily Telegraph is kind enough to come and do some lion taming, so off you go.
Great.
Oh, by the way, one other thing. I've been asked to mention that we are being very futuristic, and we've got a hashtag for those of you in the audience who are tweeting. It's Monaco MF10, and if you can append that to all your posts, we'll be off and running. Thank you. And we'll do about 40 minutes of this, and then we can have a drink.
Yes.
Thank you, people.
Great. I'm sure we'll all want to drink after this. Anyway, welcome, guys. We've heard for a long time that mobile is the future, and now it sounds like mobile is here. Or maybe it's been here for a little while, but now we're all taking advantage of it. So I just wanted to start off with what sort of was the theme of this, or the title theme of this session, and find out who's actually making some money out of this, especially in the app economy, because a lot of people are now consuming content through apps. It's the easiest way to get a lot of content bundled. And I just wanted to put to the panel, maybe we'll start with Bob, because MTV, I know, have invested a lot in apps, and you've also got a lot of great content. Who's making money, and how are they doing it?
Well, I think, look, and apps are, you can think of it as a year old. So it's definitely the early days of apps. That said, it's hard to imagine they didn't exist more than a year ago because of the way not only probably everyone in this room, but certainly what our research says about people around the world using them to access, in this case, content. I think we're in I know where we are at MTV Networks International, we're in the early days of making money on apps. We do both paid apps and free apps, and so on a standalone basis, we make a little money. That's a good thing.
A little, just a little.
Yeah, relative to our other revenue streams,
Okay.
It's still a little money. I mean, you, on the other hand, is building the bedrock for all this stuff. I'm hoping is making a lot of money at the moment, but just looking at the behavior and the usage, and we released around 25, 26 apps this year. We'll release clearly, over double that next year. We've released them relative to existing franchises, and that's where you have to differentiate. When I say we make a little money on a standalone basis, it's also part of keeping franchises fresh. So we have 3 apps on Apple's all-time top 100, which is kind of interesting. 2 of those are SpongeBob. And SpongeBob was born before the internet, never mind before apps, right? Yet, by using this technology and this platform provides a way to keep the franchise fresh and engage, in this case, the world's younger consumers in a way that they hadn't been before. And I believe that that is part of the inherent appeal of this. It is a way to grow franchises, keep them contemporary, and that's really where the big money, at least for companies such as ours, will be made. It'll be marbleized.
Is it more of a supportive mechanism as opposed to a main revenue driver?
Look, in today's media environment, dealing with the fragmentation of digital and consumer behavior, you have to offer a multi-platform experience. At least that's what we believe. And sometimes it's hard to say what's support and what's the core. I mean, for us, still linear television is the core in terms of the amount of consumption, in terms of revenues, and therefore profitability or earnings. But we have integrated these digital platforms, including mobile, into that experience. And make no mistake, they are very important to consumers for continuing to make them feel that this is a contemporary experience. For advertisers, that are looking to ways to cut through the clutter and ensure that their messages are received to get people to purchase products or services or what have you. and for our broader, constituencies. It's
Okay.
part of the puzzle.
So Hans, to bring you in, have you got an opinion on who's making the real money?
I think that what I try to say that we are in a paradigm shift, and I think there's going to be different type of operating systems. It's going to be different type of devices. What we see today is sort of smartphones and sort of very much usage that is close to what we believe is content that we have today. I think we do a lot of consumer surveys to our consumer labs. I mean, how quickly haven't we changed for doing www and searching on the network to having an apps? Just that change is not somebody that we have invented. It's actually coming from the consumer. We have a consumer demand that is now changing the whole environment. So if I would know the answer how it will end up, I would probably tell you, but I think that, I don't know.
Can't I coax you to share a little bit of that
No,
knowledge?
yeah, there are some ideas, but I think the most important is that the technology is there and the innovation is there and the consumer demand is there and the devices is coming. And I think that anyone that really wants to be part of it, if the mobile industry has been interesting in the last 10 years, I can tell you, it's going to be even more interesting in the next 10 years. But there's going to be different winners. And again, it's not given if you were part of the winning team the last 10 years doing it, it's not sure you're going to be in the next 10 years. But that's usually how a paradigm shift is happening. So I wait and see, but I think the technology is there and the mobility is there, and we're going to see a different usage in 10 years from now.
David, any views on that?
Well, we're making money.
Yeah, you are.
and we.
Do you want to just, for the benefit of the audience, maybe give a bit of background on Akamai, just quickly?
What do the geeks do? So
yeah.
Basically we built a cloud with 80,000 servers in 71 countries to direct the traffic, because as it grows, and it's grown 1,000 times in the last 10 years, this broadband cloud. And what he was saying is it'll grow another 1,000 altogether. Yeah. You need to direct that traffic. So that's what we do. And this means most of the apps that are downloaded come over the Akamai system. So we see them, and we know who's paying us. So there's a lot of money being made on paid apps already. And I think it's important when you're in the media to make sure you look more broadly. Most of the big money apps are actually B2B apps. So, business productivity, you mentioned healthcare. There's a lot of things that are helping doctors and physicians, for example. A lot of things that are helping delivery trucks. So there's a lot of apps that are going to devices being used in broadband and mobile ways. What that says is ultimately those that make money are those that deliver utility that people want to seek out. And therefore, I think in the media world, the best content will be sought. Some of it's being paid. We're seeing more paid media in the app world. And then advertisers who actually figure out how to make content that's so useful, people seek it out, or to be connected with the most popular content are going to make good money. So ultimately, the content really matters in the app world, and good content gets paid for one way or another already, and that will only grow.
So following on from that, great content, but it's also got to be great quality, and the delivery's got to be there. So, although we are moving fast, and you've talked about 50 billion connected devices by 2020, Hans, when are we going to get to the stage where the 3G or 4G network is as reliable as, say, a stationary bit of technology in your house, like the radio or the television set? You turn it on and it works always. The whole mobile concept is brilliant, but when are we going to get to the stage where we can really rely upon that level of quality, HD, always being able to be delivered, 3D maybe, I don't know.
I think we had it in the beginning of 2000 when 3G was deployed, but then when nobody was using it. So I think, again, the consumer demand is actually the one that's driving it right now. Roughly 25% of the Earth population have a 3G coverage today. But just knowing that all the technology is out there is going to be 3G enabled and partly 4G enabled the next 5 years. I think that definitely it's going to be improving. But yet again, if the usage continues as we see, the smartphones continue, it's going to be a while before it catches up. But I think that when it's going to be clearer what type of content is going to be used, what type of application, of course it's going to be quality of service in the network where you need to secure certain, especially, just take an example. If you talk to a big truck company, what is their dream? The dream is that they never need to bring in the truck in the car shop to fix it. And an engine has equally much software as anything we are doing here. So if you can just upload or download software to the car, they never need to come into the workshop. That would be a huge efficient, and they are of course prepared to pay for that, because that is sort of avoiding alternative cost. When that request comes, then you need to actually cater for, they can actually upload and download horsepower or new software for the engine that is performing better. Then you need to do that. So I think over the next 5 years, we're going to see clear improvements in the networks. If it's going to be enough, that's the consumer and the enterprise going to define.
So you're saying the next 5 years. David, what's your opinion?
Yeah, so I think the devices, you have to remember Wi-Fi in this. So there are limits, right? So 10 years ago, we did the Victoria's Secret fashion show. It was at 16 gigabytes per second, which, and it crashed because too many people came to see it. Last summer, we did the World Cup in high definition. It was 1.6 terabytes per second, which is 1,000 times more. That's 3G is a long way from being able to do 1.6 terabytes per second. At that speed, you can download the entire Library of Congress of the United States in 45 seconds. So
that's a good stat.
It's the devices that are at that speed. You can, with Wi-Fi, watch the World Cup on an iPad in high definition. So I think what's important is that we're working together. That because there's a lot of things that need to be mobile, there's a lot of things that need to work 3G and 4G, but it's not the enemy of Wi-Fi. They work together.
So how far are we off from Wi-Fi being where it should be for mobile devices?
We had nearly 2 million people watching the World Cup in high definition live, streaming at that pace without any interruptions, without buffering. So it's there now. I think in order for it to be billions of people, we need to continue to add capacity, but we're increasing our capacity by 3 times a year. So I think certainly within 5 years, by the Wi-Fi platform and the 3G and 4G platforms working together, this dream of mobility will work. And I think what he mentioned was also download. So there's a lot of ways to balance the use of the technology so that to a person, to a consumer, it can feel like TV in your pocket.
Okay, we're just going to bring Bob in here, because correct me if I'm wrong, you're also on Viacom's board in India, is that correct?
We have a joint venture.
You have a joint venture out in India, and I thought we'd talk maybe a bit sort of more broadly, because it seems in our microcosm of the media world, everybody using, connected devices are using iPhones and Blackberries, and obviously it's not like that everywhere else in the world at all. And I just wanted to try and find out how, in your experience over there, connected devices are working and how media companies and content creators are trying to tap into that and develop different things. You mentioned, your apps doing well in the App Store and all of that, Apple's App Store. What about other stores and what about other platforms getting into that?
So I think part of the challenge here is for a media company or anyone looking to leverage these platforms, deciding which ones you support. Because even if you look at smartphones in general, to serve every smartphone requires a lot of customization. So you're going to have to pick and choose, and you pick and choose based on country and a whole set of decisions around where you think there's critical mass or what have you. Overlay that to geography, because geographies are very different. I mean, if you compare, you're asking about India. India is still a place where, at least on the mobile side, it's relatively low bandwidth, relatively simple. In fact, I was with the CMO of one of the major mobile carriers, and we were talking about at the time they were adding 7 million subs a month. And he said, yeah, but you have to understand those are the people that buy cigarette by the stick. So, there is real, and it's why when you operate, as my peers do, or my colleagues do, on an operation that spans countries, you have to differentiate by country. Like Seoul, or Korea, everyone has, 100 megabits a second, probably wired, but they also are very advanced on the mobile side. You can do a whole bunch of stuff there that you can't do in India. In India, we're fortunate in that we operate a pretty strong television portfolio, including the #2 television network in the country. That's still the primary media experience there. Given time, mobile will come in. If you look at what we're doing in Europe, we do a bunch of stuff on mobile because the infrastructure is quite frankly better. So we do everything from branded mobile services, in this case under the MTV brand, where a consumer in Germany or Switzerland or the Netherlands and some other countries as well, Italy, France, can get minutes, SMS, data, and maybe a branded device with media for one kind of monthly package rate. and it's a way that an operator can differentiate their service vis-a-vis other operators who are looking to target the youth demo. So, as you look at these platforms, there are a variety of ways to go at it. One key point that you got to constantly look at is what is the state of the infrastructure? Because it is still, like other things, different on a country-by-country basis, and certainly the Indias of the world, while they have huge potential, they're not quite there yet.
Okay, so just Hans, to bring you in on this.
Yeah, there's a pretty simple reason for that. I mean, the 3G licenses was awarded in the third quarter of this year, so they've only had 2G licenses in India, so they haven't been able to deploy 3G equipment with mobile broadband. So I guess we will see that, and I think that with innovation in India and the quick pace of development in India, and also with the limitation of fixed broadband, because not every country can build that because it takes longer and there are other physical problems. I think that mobility and the mobile broadband in India will bring a lot of Bollywood and a lot of TV and media out to the handset, because that will be the only way for the Indians, many of them, to actually access content. So I think that will happen, but it has been a very simple and practical reason. There has not been 3G in India, no licenses. But the deployment is going on as we speak. Probably take a year or two, but definitely it's ongoing there. But I think also an important point, which I think was brought up as well, that the fixed broadband and the mobile broadband will live together, because you need to carry a lot of the data on the fixed broadband anyhow. But the end user can have a high speed as a mobile broadband user. And I can have, LTE has a latency that is equally good as any fixed broadband, but the carry backwards is going to be on the fixed broadband. So they will live together, but the last mile will be mobile broadband in the vast majority in the world. Not, of course, in the US, where you have fantastic fiber, etc., and parts of Europe, but the rest of the world will never deploy the fixed broadband because it's going to be too expensive. And the way to do it is going to be mobility, and they're going to have a device that's going to be fairly cheap, and that's why we can do it.
Okay, well, I'm going to throw out to the audience in a moment, but just before I do, you were talking about the best use. I think a lot of people here probably want to know what they should be doing with mobile, how they should be innovating. It's all very well talking about how we're there now, or we're nearly there on certain networks, but just to come to your point, you're talking about quality content being what will actually get people's attention. Do you think mobile is now at the stage where it can do what the iPod did for music in terms of reversing the privacy trend and getting people to actually pay for decent quality on the move?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think what people should do is actually not try to take the content they had in the fixed world and move it. There are things that are better in mobile. We do most of, we watch Facebook because we do a lot of that. And I tell you, a lot of the social network interactions are done on mobile. A big percentage. And it's a very social medium.
To the platform.
It's a game medium. There's a lot of games played on mobile. There's a lot of games played with friends on mobile, an extension of social. There is some video consumption, particularly on important and urgent events like news events and sports events. There are lots of B2B applications. I think it's important that you really think about the utility of what would be better if you took it with you. What would be better of living your life? It's not trying to take the television experience and put it on the mobile phone. There's so much more we can do if we get people out of their chairs and out into life again by taking the computer with them. So to me, what's important, I think, is to really be innovative and creative about how your content and how your community will exist in the mobile world, because that's where we're really seeing the uptake.
Okay. Has anybody got any questions? We've got some microphones going around for any of the panelists up here. Don't be shy. I know it's the first session of the forum. No? Nobody? Oh, yes?
That's one.
There is one.
Hi, I'm
Do you want to say who you are? Say who you are.
Yeah, hi, I'm Andy Plesser from BTV, and I wanted to ask a question about, for video publishers, the opportunity to distribute their videos on the mobile platform on an app versus the mobile web, and sort of what issues need to be considered in that strategy. Thank you.
What we're seeing, everybody thinks the mobile web's going to be easier, but the reality is, if it's just one video, it's fine to publish to the web, people will find it. But if you actually, having followed BTV, if you actually want to push it so that it's more of a TV experience and that it's there for people, apps are more like a channel. Apps are more like, feeds, so people go back to them time and time again. So if you've got a series of content, if you want to keep them engaged, so far what we're seeing is an app is a better format for that, because people will go back to it naturally, and it's more the way they would use a television channel.
I just want to add to your prior comment about creating unique product for mobile, and I think you're absolutely right. It's not about necessarily taking the 22-minute or half-hour show and putting it up on mobile. We can do that, we do that. But it's really about using the inherent capabilities of these platforms, we believe, largely together to create differentiated experiences. So, in the context of our European Music Awards, or EMAs, that we had last Sunday in Madrid, that was very much a multi-platform play. So we had linear TV feeds that were literally going out around the world, live. We had internet connections, both on our site and via Facebook and Twitter, going on simultaneously, again, around the world. And we had mobile connections both via apps and via WAP. And what you saw, a little example of integrating Facebook into the television, we were using a vendor's, new partner of ours, software, where you had a live video stream going, and Facebook as like a picture-in-a-picture. The average connect time on Sunday for that was 2 hours, and we had 6 figures of people doing it concurrently. That was pretty cool, And so, but it wasn't about taking just the linear feed and putting it out there. It was about giving someone, in this case in the wired world, something unique to do. And that's where we've seen much more in terms of much more positive consumer reaction and also business reaction.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that in a moment. I think we've got a question over here. Could you, I've got quite a few questions.
Right here.
Good. Can you say who you are?
Perrin Johar, I'm Chief Marketing Officer of JumpTap. I love this because we have a content provider, technology enabler, as well as a handset manufacturer. I'm curious, as mobile advertising evolves, how important do you think relevancy is given the personal nature of the medium?
Okay. Is it me?
Yeah, go for it, Hans.
Okay. I think that, as we heard, at least in our studies, people taking the social network mobile, they basically use it more mobile than they do fixed when they bring it out, if it's a Facebook or something. That tells me something about how you can also glue mobile advertising to it as people actually are bringing it. But again, I think what these two experts on the sides of me are saying, which I think is absolutely right, you need to think about new ways to putting it together, the content. And remember that much of the content that you have in this room, you can cut that either for a over-the-top service or a mobile phone or for TV, because the content is done once. But you need to think about how can you do different interaction on it. And then, of course, putting mobile advertising on top of that with the positioning or something like that, of course, it's possible. And I think it will happen over time here. But it will take a little bit more time than the fixed sort of that we have seen. But my feeling is that we will see much more mobile advertising going forward.
Okay, we've got a question over here. If you could just say who you are, please.
Hi, Farhan Cook, Mobile Advertising News. One question to Akamai and one question to MTV. I recently heard that Steve Jobs restricted the bandwidth, the amount of video an app could include. For example, a news app or a TV app cannot have too much video because it just slows everything down. Is this something temporary? Or, since you're the bandwidth people, you should have a good answer to that. And MTV, how do you feel TV apps are going to develop? Connecting TV with tablets and internet and everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm not really at liberty to say what Apple's going to do.
That's a shame. Come on. It's only us. It's only us.
Apple should speak for itself. What I would say is, of course, there's a great defense of the experience. And it's a terrific experience, the Apple experience, and I applaud them for doing it. I do think there are ways to certainly expand capacity. We're doing that every day. That said, there's also a question of whether, what is the right experience and what is the right ratio of advertising to content. On television, I think it's gone pretty far in terms of how much time is spent in parts of the world on advertising versus content. In other devices, people want to use their time more wisely. So I actually believe what's going to happen is that each individual person, as we get to everyone being connected, is going to see actually less advertising per person, but the advertising they will see will be more useful to them with more utility. And that will increase its value. I think that'll change pricing for sure. That also puts a higher burden on the advertising to be more useful to people. But to me, it's as much about the design of the content as the bandwidth in that particular case. And because I think people love these devices. They're using them for community. They're using them for entertainment. We can't interrupt them for 18, minutes out of every 30. I think we've got to do a better job of being useful to them.
Okay, sorry. So Bob, you had a question. How are TV apps
So I
going
think,
to develop?
yeah, I mean, there's multiple parts of that answer. I'd start with, we've had a long-standing partnership with the paid TV community, whether cable, DTH, and now, in many cases, IPTV. And we are very much focused on keeping that business alive and healthy. That said, we can't ignore consumer behavior, and so one of the things going on with consumer behavior are people accessing television content differently. And so, the question about what should people be thinking about, et cetera, this is an example of it, which is our view is you have to experiment, you have to try stuff, and when you do it, you got to measure it and then honestly critique it. So we deliver video through mobile in a variety of ways. We do it through, call it streamed mobile television services. We do it through on-demand type applications, typically in these bundled MBLs. We do it through apps. And by the way, those apps could run on a mobile device. They could run on connected TV. And on the connected TV side, there's an opportunity to do, let's call it, long tail output deals, which complement experience. So I think we're clearly still in the early days of this, but there's no question that these different platforms are providing opportunity to serve consumers in a way they haven't been, either remotely because they're on the subway or the train in Japan and they're going to be commuting for an hour and they want video, fine, you can deliver it. So it's opened up time beyond the couch, which is a fantastic thing for the media industry. Or in the case of people that might be interested in some library product that's not currently on air because of the limitation of, let's call it the 24-hour day, the connected TVs with apps provide an opportunity to serve that and really complement the other product we have out there. And again, we have to experiment with it, see what works, fine-tune it, and keep pushing it forward.
Okay, great. I think we've got another question over here.
Hello, Mike Butcher from TechCrunch. I'm just a little bit concerned because I'm old enough to remember the hype around WAP during the turn of the century. And at that time, it was all going to be wonderful high bandwidth. And given that it takes something like the same amount of bandwidth is 500,000 SMSs, is equivalent to somebody's trying to watch a YouTube video on their mobile phone. In December, there'll be the holidays, there'll be Christmas and new smartphones coming on stream. The feature phone is now the smartphone. 50 billion devices. Can the networks cope? It doesn't seem to me that they can. And I'm worried that we are, once again, hyping ourselves into thinking that this is the case.
Hans, do you want to start with that, or David?
You can
It's more of a network
I'll take
question.
that one. It is a constant technology evolution at the same time, to be honest. And as I said, we are now coming up. When I talk about speed, speed can be splitted. So if the mobile networks now can do 42 megabits per second, going up to 84, and then over 100, that doesn't mean that one individual need 100. You can split that in a cell. Of course, it's still going to depend on how finally the mobile operators are going to invest the capacity in the network. That's for sure. But that technology evolution continues. We see now 3G has, as I said, quite a lot left. And at the same time, 4G is coming with LTE. That is fairly, I wouldn't say only fairly, it's even more superior than 3G, especially on latency, because the speed you can always use for capacity distribution. But the latency is so different. And the latency, that is what we all are seeing on the screen, on the computer or on the smartphone. That's how fast it goes to get the website down or something down. The latency on LTE compared to 3G is it's a huge difference in latency. So yes, it's always going to be a challenge depending on consumer usage and the smartphones that was feature phones before. Yes, it's going to be a challenge. I think the technologies are there to support it. Then, of course, it has to be rolled out and existing. But technology is definitely being part of it right now. And I think that we have much more sort of alignment between what is happening with the phones and with the networks. I mean, we have to remember when 3G came, the networks was enabled, but we didn't have any phones. Now we have more of alignment there. So I'm more positive than I was 2000, even though I wasn't doing this job 2000, but that was probably how I felt.
So yes, it can cope.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
there could be some disappointments in the holidays with the peak, for sure.
Yeah, we have the disclaimer.
Managing
Do
your
not deter
expectations.
yourself. I think the other difference between the WAP experience and now is that we're all working together.
Yeah.
The fixed broadband and the mobile broadband, you know, us getting the content to the edge of the internet and then taking it the last mile.
Yeah.
Then we haven't even talked about peer-to-peer and how people's devices can actually send content to each other without coming back into the networks.
Yeah.
There's a lot of technology if the world is really networked. And that's what I thought was exciting about this is a fully networked world driven by a lot of applications, not just media, make it a lot easier to pull it off this time. But the networks of the world actually have to find a way to connect better. And that's a lot of what we're doing right now is figuring that out.
Okay, well, I think we've got a few more questions. Yep, one over here, and then we'll go into the middle.
It's a lot more.
Good.
I know, it's grown.
Hi, my name is Hugo. I work for Google in our mobile product team. And I have a question for the wireless networking experts on the panel. One of the biggest issues that I see both as a developer and as a user of today's wireless networks is that it's a black hole or a black box in the sense, a black hole I guess, in the sense that I don't know what uplink and downlink bandwidth is available at any given point in time. As a developer, I would love to be able to query the network to find out what's available, and I can then make decisions and adapt my application behavior. As a user, 5 bars just doesn't cut it, right? I want to know, I want a little clock that tells me this is the network conditions that you're in right now. I know that this may sound like a superficial question, but I understand that it has deep implications to network architecture, and it requires standardization. It's kind of a big boy game. Are you guys going to start going down that path for us?
Is it to me again?
Yeah, it is.
Well,
Sadly, for you.
we'll do our part, but you've got to bring the
Yeah,
carriers along.
Yeah. No, I think that, I mean, the question is, I think that over time that will be I mean, as things go mobile and people want quality of service, they need to know if they're going to get the service and what type of speeds they're going to get.
So you are going to improve it?
Yeah, definitely. I think that is the biggest opportunity for the operators as well, I mean, to really make that happen. So I think for them, that is the best opportunity to have.
When are you going to improve it then?
When?
Yeah, when?
Oh, now it's 500 operators around the world, so it would be hard for me to make a judgment on all of them.
Oh, come on, you're Ericsson. You can fix this.
No,
Just to be clear, I don't want to pay more for
Yeah, we
better
know.
connection. I just want to know
Never wanna pay.
what the
and
network
you're
looks
Google.
like.
You have the money.
Yeah.
When we
He will answer to that one.
when we open the data, because we have this data, it could create a marketplace, and for some people it might be worth more. I think the other part of his question that's important, because you brought up Korea, is I also hope this pushes two-way content. A lot of this traffic only goes one way.
Yeah.
What's good about Korea is that it's
down.
mandated that it's equal bandwidth both directions. And I think as you move to a more connected world, a more social network world, it's important that we be able to communicate out as much as receive content in, and that will also open this data question that he
It
has.
sounds like you're going to have to pay for
We'd
it.
love to build those APIs as part of Android, but we need the network to provide the answer.
Thanks, Google.
You know, this raises
Thanks.
it raises another point that we haven't talked about, which maybe seem obvious, but I remember when the Victoria's Secret thing went, and the site went down and everything.
I missed that one.
Well, you didn't miss much. It went down.
I missed
But
it.
He's got it in the library.
Okay.
it's in the library, yeah. But one of the things we're very focused on today, because we're not only multi-platform, but we rely on a lot of people that we don't fully control. So we've changed organization structures. We also changed how we communicate with our business partners. So today, when we have any major event coming, or people like Akamai, maybe Apple, other people all know it, and we plan for it in advance. Because the reality is, demand is very dynamic, and it tends to be, at least in some cases, driven by events we can control, right? When an event is scheduled, when we're making an announcement, et cetera. We know, if you will, the network's going to react. The consumers are going to react.
So you can plan
If we
better.
don't tell the people like the Akamais that, then it's our fault. So I'm sure there's going to be network capacity problems, and at the end of the day, probably for a while, because there seems to be an insatiable demand for these kind of applications and product. But we can help mitigate that, at least to some degree, by working very tightly. And I think, I'm sure the Googles of the world obviously know that, but to the extent, you're talking about smaller people, tight communication flow, not only inside your company on a multi-platform basis, but across your business constituencies, maybe including advertising partners, can help manage this a lot. Because we haven't had stuff go down lately, and that's partially because people have been ready for, these bursts.
Okay, great. We've got another question. I want to get as many in as possible. Thank you.
Douglas Warshore, First Person Communications. I'd love to find out from each of you what was the most recent application or device or behavior that you witnessed that made you just look at things differently.
Great. Who wants to go
Wow,
first?
I have so many. I think that my experience from Africa, what people do with the phone, when I was there last time in Malawi, seeing actually the mobile phone with a simple MMS, taking a picture of a blood sample, sending the picture, we talk about probably 100 kilometers from there, to a doctor that can actually see if it was malaria or not. Sending an SMS back and telling them, give them this injection. I mean, I was basically crying. I mean, it's just fantastic what the technology can do. That's an application. It was a simple MMS of a blood sample with an application that can actually see if there was malaria or not, sending it back. And then they give them a shot. Fantastic. One doctor on every 10,000 people in Africa.
Okay.
Remote doctor.
David or Bob, who wants to go next?
I don't know, I'm in the entertainment business. My example can't run with that.
Don't worry, we won't
That's
judge
a good
you.
way because we're a little bit different in the panel.
No, I think it is extraordinary that what technology can do. It's not a mobile example, but related to that, our company has long been active in what we call pro-social, including the fight against HIV and AIDS. And unfortunately, a lot of that, the problem is a little more concentrated, or at least the understanding is weaker in some places like Africa. And this year we did a set of long-form programming episodes, essentially, that were entertainment-based, but also about communicating messages. And they had an impact, and they were viewed in the top 50, I think, most AIDS-affected countries. And it shows, in our little entertaining way, how we can also make a difference. But to your specific question, I would say, you want the latest example? The latest example was yesterday, and it was this aforementioned integration of Facebook and our video stream. And the reason I thought it was relevant is not because it looked cool. The reason was because the average user, of which there were over 100,000, spent 2 hours doing it. And so to me, that was a powerful example of, again, how we can integrate these experiences to increase the aggregate value. And that, for us, is what it's all about.
And David?
So the way things build, so prior, the thing I'm going to talk about is the Chilean miners. So prior to that, the two big events we had on the internet at high speed were the Obama inauguration and Michael Jackson's funeral. Because these happened during the day and people watch them from work, and when you watch from work, you watch television on the internet. What was interesting to me is when the miners came out, as they were coming out, how it built around the world. And it was, because he's right, usually we get people to tell us we're doing a big event, and the Jackson people and the Obama people, we knew when that would happen. We didn't get the miner thing and how much it would peak. And I think the way that people use social networks to draw demand, the amount of sort of sideline stories of people making that a personal experience, and the fact that everyone in the world cared about those 33 guys, it was really quite special. And massive, sort of big cable network kind of ratings at work on the internet was a big change.
Okay, any more questions? There were a few.
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, hi, Greg Stewart. I'm the new CEO of the Mobile Marketing Association. So I have a question for, I think in particular, Hans, David, and it might get to you, Robert, also. So I'd like to hear kind of a macro view, I guess all of you. I want to hear kind of a macro view about the shifts that you think are going to happen in the advertising media business. Because, we have Google here, which is the single largest advertising brand we've ever had. It just came out of nowhere in the last decade. Newspapers have seen significant shift. As I've talked to operators, I think that they were frustrated by the fact that a lot of companies made a lot of money off the backs of their networks, and they didn't participate in that in the same way. So there seems to be a real redrawing of the lines around, in particular, mobile. So I'd love to hear your view about where you think the media advertising industry is going, who's in power, who's losing, and so on, and maybe where your companies end up in that.
So specific to mobile?
Yeah, specific to
So just to say, we're coming to the end now, so if we can get these things in a nutshell, that would be great. a macro view in a nutshell.
I think one of the problems with mobile advertising so far is, of course, that if you have a content and you want to do mobile advertising on the mobility, you need to go to each and every operator. I think that is one of the problems, because you don't really know, I mean, if that are the segmented group you want to have. So I guess that, and usually, at least for me, advertising is very local, country-wise or something like that. So I think that my personal solution would be that operators together offer a service that can do mobile advertising. I think they sit on a fantastic asset. They know who are the users. They know them where they are. They have a fantastic knowledge about the mobile users compared to maybe an internet connection. But I think it has to come something together in the industry in order to offer it for the media companies. That's my personal view.
Yeah, as Spencer mentioned, I was in the advertising business for a long time before this. So I see both sides now. And I have to say, what I'm seeing particularly in mobile is advertisers going directly to the content to actually, the things that are working are to produce special content that's really useful to people in the mobile environment, as opposed to trying to just inject ads. It takes real creativity. And I think it's going to be a challenge for the advertising world, because they've all these specialists, but you can't have an idea done by one agency turned over to a media agency, turned over to a mobile specialist. The creative idea and the content have to come together. That's the kind of stuff that's really working.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, look, as media companies, we need to be marketing problem solvers. And as the more the world gets complicated, the more that's important. I think I completely agree that coming up with a creative solution that will allow an advertiser's message to get through is what it's all about. So in the case of the EMAs, as example, last week, as part of that, we included in one of our sponsorships actually a flashlight ad, which is the Sony Ericsson app store protocol.
Very good.
That's nicely
which was
done.
It was coincidence, but as part of an integrated package. And I can tell you that advertiser felt very good about it, not because it was an app and it was solving the mobile, but it was part of an overall solution that they felt made a difference. And I think mobile will be part of that, but it's not just about mobile.
Great. Well, I think what we can sort of conclude from that is that you've got to make whatever you're doing for mobile bespoke. The content's still got to be just as good, but utilising the facilities mobile brings. And advertisers are now going directly to the content owners to talk about what to make. And nicely, Wi-Fi and 3G are working together well, so the network shouldn't fall down, and there's lots of notice being given before big events. I think that sort of wraps up some of what we've said. But thank you very much to the panel, and thank you very much to you, and obviously everybody will be around for later.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to keep the housekeeping now very short, because we can do tomorrow morning the real nitty-gritty. The main thing is tonight we've got drinks up at the Columbia Room, which is, if you kind of retrace your steps to the hotel, back into the lobby, up that stairway or up the elevators to that business level reception area. And Booze and Company are our delightful hosts tonight, so Tom Stewart will have a few words to say. We'll also have, starting 9-ish, our famous nightcaps in the Blue Gin Bar, and that'll be announced also at the cocktail party. So I think, with no further ado, everybody should just scamper, and we'll deal with everything else in the morning. 9 a.m., and I'm going to say this again, we really love being on time. And so 9 a.m. we're going to start, whether or not you're here. And so be here, because we're going to have some great demos and lots of other fun things. And thank you guys all for bringing it all together. Macro, micro, thank you. Thank you, Emma.